Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeanette Hoffman. I oversee concerts and other music programming at the North Carolina Museum of Art. Thank you for joining our first webinar in the NCMA in Dialogue series. This virtual event aims to bring together artists and audiences utilizing the arts as a bridge to foster conversations around the important topics of our time and inspiring new depths of creative understanding, dialogue, and growth. In tonight's presentation, NCMA in Dialogue, A Musical Journey Through American Race Relations, our speaker, Eric Dozier, will speak to Black American music as much more than entertainment. It is a social force, a means and modality for social and spiritual transformation. A few logistics before we get started. The formal presentation will last for an hour and will be followed by a Q&A and a little send-off that will end around 8:30. Please feel free to submit any questions by the Zoom Q&A feature or by the chat box in the YouTube stream if you're in there, and we'll get to as many as we can. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube account after if you'd like to rewatch and share. We know virtual programming is new to many, including us, so we'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for joining us on this journey and supporting the museum in our new endeavors. Now to introduce our speaker, a cultural activist, anti-racist educator, and itinerant blues preacher, Eric Dozier leverages the power of music to promote healing, justice, and racial reconciliation. He describes music as a window into the thoughts, souls, and emotions of people, essential in creating powerful moments of community and transformation. Through his heart-stirring, soulful arrangements, dynamic speeches, historical presentations, and interactive music workshops, he has dedicated himself to welding the hearts and minds of a divided humanity into one loving fellowship. He is a graduate of Duke University and Duke Divinity School and is currently pursuing a doctorate at the University of Tasmania, researching Black gospel music performed in multicultural contexts as a pathway to racial justice. He's on a mission to show the world what community sounds like. Eric, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. So good to be here and so good to be doing something with my folks back in North Carolina. As you heard, I spent a good portion of my young life up there in undergraduate and graduate school at Duke University. So I'm very happy anytime I can engage in some kind of collaboration with a place that I consider my home. So Jeanette, thank you for having me. And I just want to jump right in because one of the things that I am a firm believer in, and something that my grandparents always told me, was this: that spirit does not descend without a song. And so I think that in the spirit of that, I'm just going to start right there, okay? Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, along away from home, along away from home. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way along the way from home, a long way from home. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. While I'm on this pilgrim's journey, I want Jesus to walk with me, because he walks with my mother, and he walks with me. I said he walks with my mother, and he walks with me. While I'm on this pilgrim's journey. Oh, I want my master to walk with me. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way. Sometimes I feel like I've lost my way along the way, a long way, a long a long way from home. All right. So I am, like I said, I'm so glad to be here. And uh, particularly to be here to talk about these spirituals, to talk about this music as more than just music. But I also want to share something with you. I want to share this little prayer. Now, this prayer was penned uh, by the great scholar W.E.B. Du Bois, and this is what he prayed. And this prayer is referred to as the Litany of Atlanta. And he penned this prayer in 1919. And uh, he he penned it in response to what is now referred to as the Red Summer, which marked a time of a series of race riots across the country, and where white American citizens were going in and attacking their fellow Black citizens, taking land and property and life. And this is what he prayed. He said, "Bewildered are we and passion tossed, mad with the madness of a mobbed, mocked and murdered people. Straining at the arm post of thy throne, we raise our shackled hands and charge thee, God, by the bones of our stolen fathers, by the tears of our dead mothers, by the very blood of our crucified Christ. What meaneth this? Tell us the plan. Give us the sign. Whisper, speak, call, great God, for thy silence is white terror to our hearts. The way, oh God, show us the way and point us the path." This symbol, those of you who know, you can say a lot with pictures. This is a symbol for Sankofa, and it means to go back and get it. As I take that, what I take that to mean, it means that we reach back into our past and find those things that will help propel us into the future. And so you see the bird reaching back, and sometimes we have to reach back to go forward. And I'm going to take just a little moment to introduce you to my family, or at least some members of my family. So these are the matriarchs of my family. So that little dude right there in the red shirt, that is me. And I grew up in a small town, the small town of Bakewell, Tennessee. Population about 300 people. So it's very, very tiny. And it's still about 300 people, 350 people. And so I wanted to share this quote with you. This is from Dr. Cornel West. Before I do that, I guess if I'm looking at the picture, to your left is my mother. Standing above my mother is her mother, my grandmother. If you keep moving further left, that's my great grandmother. And then if you look down on the floor in the left-hand corner, I think that is my great great grandmother. We called her Ma Judy. Now, those are my grandparents on my mother's side. I also knew my great grandmother on her father's side as well. When people ask me how I came to this music, I tell them I came to it honestly. That's how I came to it. I sat at the feet of these great women, and they nurtured me in the craft. This is what Cornel West says about those cultural arts. He says, "The genius of our Black foremothers and forefathers was to create powerful buffers to ward off the nihilistic threat, to equip Black folk with cultural armor to beat back the demons of hopelessness, meaninglessness, and lovelessness. These buffers consisted of cultural structures and feeling that created and sustained communities. This armor constituted ways of life and struggle that embodied the values of service and sacrifice, love and care, discipline and excellence. These traditions consist primarily of Black religious and civic institutions that sustain familial and communal networks of support." What that tells me is that, when we sing, we're not just singing. We're engaging in moments of recreating ourselves and recreating things that we need to help us go forward. I think the professor, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, said it best when she said, "When we sing, we announce our existence." So our singing is more than just singing. It's more than a performance practice. It's a flower of a value system with operating principles that serve as a framework for revolutionary communication and revolutionary communication between people. In the words of James Weldon Johnson, they speak the group wisdom and express the group philosophy of life. That's what's in Black music. And so as I go across the world and as I've shared what I've learned, and I've shared my home and my family, my grandmothers and my great grandmothers with folks, it is my hope that this music will stimulate empathy for people that have given their cultural production very, very freely to the world. I also look at the music as a way of becoming culturally literate. And, you know, since we are in a museum space, you know, museums are these great institutions of culture. And a lot of times you will go into museums and you don't see a lot of art by people that look like me in museums. And so, but there is, I think that now what is beginning to happen is you see that there is a change. People are becoming aware of their own blind spots, and they're calling people up and calling people in. I want to share this with you. This is from a wonderful essay that talks about cultural literacy. And it says that the West privileges literacy based on literature and the printed word. However, the written text is only one medium through which deep knowledge manifests itself. Among Native American, Asian, African, and Aboriginal cultures, there are at least 10 other literacies through which the philosophical constructs of society are expressed. And so what we're going to be engaging in tonight is moments of sonic literacy. I want you to get to know the people, know their struggle, and understand that within this music is data. And particularly as we move through this trying time, there's a lot of data that Black people have collected about racial justice and the work that needs to be done around it. And if we are smart, we will use that data. We will take advantage of that data and build deeper connections with the community so that we can learn how to go forward, because we have been wrestling with these issues for a long time. I'm going to have you sing a little bit as well. And so that's why I have this little slide that talks about call and response, and that it's more than a performance practice, but it is a place where you connect and have and build relationships. So when I ask you to sing, I won't be able to hear you, but you take advantage of that moment to sing and announce your own existence. The professor said the methods which we Black people evolved for opposing slavery and fighting prejudice are not to be forgotten, but learned for our own and others' instructions. And before I jump right into the singing, I want to share this with you, which is a powerful quote from another writer that I hold very dear to my heart, Brother James Baldwin. And what he said is that the role of the artist is the same as the role of the lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you do not see. And so with that said, this music comes from a place of love. I love you dearly. And so let's jump right in. We can't talk about Black music if we don't talk about the spiritual, and if we don't talk about these Black and unknown bards from long ago, the Fisk Jubilee singers. And as a tribute to them, I want to share with you just a couple of spirituals that are very special to me. home is over Jordan, deep river, Lord. I want to cross over into campground. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord. I want to cross over into campground. Don't you wanna go to that gospel feast, that promised land, where all is peace. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord. I want to cross over into campground. So Deep River, that was a song that was made popular by Mr. Paul Robeson, who was actually blacklisted for his civil rights activities. But he, at the time, uh, became the one of the best selling artists during his time, black or white, because he was touring all over the world. He was singing these spirituals in some of the most prestigious halls uh, all over. Um, this piece says, to perform the spiritual was to perform one's individual and collective identity as a person of African descent in the New World. To perform the spiritual was to wage systematic warfare on the institution that imposed the chains of bondage. To sing the spiritual was to be free. Um, and you know, as we think about some of the content of that music, you know, when you hear a song like "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child," that is not hyperbole. There were a lot of motherless children that were made motherless because slave owners made them motherless and sold them for profit. I was in a workshop the other day with a bunch of asset managers and impact investors, and I told them that one of the most valuable assets ever controlled by this American republic was the black body. Um, and so when we think about songs like Motherless Child, or when we think about songs like No More Auction Block for Me, No More, No More, No More Auction Block for Me, many thousand gone. You know, people were not just creating those melodies and those words out of nowhere. They were creating those melodies out of their own experience. This is what Frederick Douglass said about that music. He says that every tone was a testimony against slavery and a prayer to God for deliverance from chains. Um, and so we're gonna keep moving on here. Uh, I want to take a turn here and talk a little bit about American roots music. And the reason I want to do that because there's a very, very special person that I want to acknowledge from North Carolina in this section. But I do a lot of workshops in schools, and what I see a lot of times is when I'm dealing with children and I say country music, most people don't think of people that look like this. They'll name Garth Brooks, or they'll name Hank Williams Sr., or they'll name the Carter family, or they'll name folks like that. But the bottom line is that the roots of country music also lie in African American communities, and that there was a very, very foundational contribution that Black people made to country music. So let's just take a minute to talk about the dark roots and the strange fruits. And the reason why we don't know that because there was a lot of propaganda going on in the institutions that erased us from this history. But in the propaganda against the Negro since emancipation in this land, we face one of the most stupendous efforts the world ever saw to discredit human beings, an effort involving universities, history, science, social life, and religion. And this is what Carter G. Woodson wrote in The Miseducation of the Negro. The same educational process which inspires and stimulates the oppressor with the thought that he is everything and has accomplished everything worthwhile depresses and crushes at the same time the spark of genius in the Negro by making him feel that his race does not amount to much and never will measure up to the standards of other people. So why don't we know a lot about this music? We don't know a lot about this music is because it didn't make it into the museums and it didn't make it into the history books. Most of what we know about this early Black music comes from fugitive slave ads like this: Runaway, Combahee Ferry, middle-sized Negro can play up on the violin. Negro man belonging to James Oliver said Negro plays well on the flute, or he beats the drum well. And so I want to share a video with you at this time, just a little bit about the roots of that music.
Eric, we're not hearing sound on that.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me just see what's happening with my sound, because I really want folks to be able to hear that. And you can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me just see what's happening here. So let me see, I have it up here. That should be playing. Let me see. Let me try one more time. So sorry. And if we can, is it working now?
No, not hearing it still.
Okay.
We heard it
So
earlier.
Yeah. Let me just
Do you want to try the share screen option? All right, now we're not hearing your mic either.
Okay, can you hear my mic now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's, I'm just gonna share my screen here because I really, really want you to see it and hear it. Okay, so there we go. And I'll just start it over.
In the 17th century came the blending of many cultures.
We had various European cultures coming together with various African cultures, and the people from each of those groups bringing their own musical backgrounds.
There's a very thin line between the music of the slave and the music of the slave master. I've actually gone back and listened to old African chants that are actually note for note songs in America 200 years ago.
Many historians believe the modern-day banjo is most closely linked to the African lute instrument called the akonting.
It wasn't until the Gibson Company comes along and does the 5-string and the 5th string and the 3-finger Scruggs roll that we get it like it is today. But it was an instrument that came out of Africa.
After slavery, America entered into its Reconstruction period. As former slaves spread across the country, so did their music.
By the time slaves were freed, and then even later in the 1920s ex-slaves began to move north in mass numbers.
The division of hillbilly versus race was predicated simply and almost exclusively on a kind of racial hierarchy, that this belongs over here to the black folk, this belongs to the white folk.
String bands basically are the link between the really rural music that people were playing in their earliest days in this country and the later music that became known as country.
Okay, did you all catch that? I hope so. So when we're talking about this music, literally Black people were erased from that, and what you saw at that time, when that music began to emerge, you saw a rise in blackface minstrelsy, blackface minstrel theater, and these shows were the shows that actually introduced the banjo to mainstream American culture. However, they did not, the way they introduced it was through making caricatures of Black people. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because here lies the foundation of the American entertainment industry. These were shows that were performed all over the world, and they were not neutral in the way that they portrayed Black people, and you can just see, from the sign. And usually at this point in the workshop, and I'll ask you to type this in the chat, if you were to describe the people in this particular picture, just throw up a couple of adjectives in the chat and tell me how you would describe them based on those images. Now, I may not be able to see your chat, but I want you to throw some things up. Yeah, silly, ignorant, caricatures, cartoonish, animals, happy monkeys, monkey-like, all of these different things. Okay, so that was childish, infantile. So many things that come up. Impish, which is a commentary on virtue, being little devils. Clown, silly. So now think about this, because at the same time that was happening, this was happening. So in 1871, the Fifth Jubilee Singers embarked on their first world tour, and they were a little nervous because they didn't know how they were going to be received by white America. and also because they did not feel like it was appropriate to sing the secret and sacred soul music of their ancestors. And one of the main reasons was because that music was used to undermine the chattel slavery system, and that it wasn't meant for everybody. It was a moment of resistance. Recall the quote that I put up earlier. And so when you think about that image there, as opposed to this image here, you see very clearly that there was an agenda. And a lot of times, if we don't put these things in historical context, you know, a lot in academic circles, the Jubilee Singers are considered to be the grandparents of the modern civil rights movement, because they refused to play segregated halls. When they went to Australia, when they went to London, when they went to New Zealand, they wouldn't play halls that Aboriginal or Maori people could not sit in. And so they were the ones that, you know, before Ray Charles did it, before these other artists did it, the Jubilee Singers did that. And so, you know, now I want you to describe the Black people that you see in this picture. Just throw a word or two up in the chat. Someone says that the Jubilee Singers, that picture evokes exact opposite of what was in that other picture. Dignified, elegant, strong, formal, smart, right? Because that's who Black people have always been. Powerful, right? So why wouldn't America want to see Black people portrayed as powerful, as dignified, as kind, as cultured, as resilient, as thinkers? They look like they have something on their mind, right? So we have to keep that in mind. And like I said, that those in the blackface minstrel theater, that's where the roots of the modern entertainment industry lies. So it's no wonder that some of the first TV shows, the first film, the first moving picture show was Birth of a Nation, and recall how Black people were portrayed in that particular movie. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving because I want to hit y'all with some more music. And here are some more pictures of Black people with banjos and fiddles and you know, early string music. This was one of the first music videos. It's Uncle John Scruggs' Little Log Cabin, where you see a Black man in 1928 being filmed playing, you know, playing the banjo on the porch with his children. And the folks responsible for doing that were record executives, the music industry, because this is what they thought. In the 1920s and 1930s, early record companies essentially doubled their audiences by dividing them along racial lines. This split lingers today in the still largely segregated audiences of what are now called blues and country music. Okay? So when Black people were playing banjos and different things like that, they referred to it as country blues or just the blues, even if the style was the same, or even if they had taught white artists to do the same. And the white music began to be called hillbilly music and eventually country music, and began to embody this notion of a Southern rural nostalgia, meaning like, oh, this long forgotten time of, you know, this great time of long ago. And so you hear a lot of that kind of, you know, kind of make America great again, right? Kind of some of those types of things. Well, that's what country music became largely to be about. Okay. Now, all of these people, Jimmy Rogers, Uncle Dave Macon, the Carter family, Hank Williams Sr., the Carter family, Daddy Carter was taught to play guitar by a man by the name of Leslie Riddle. Hank Williams Sr. Was taught by a man by the name of Rufus T-Top Payne, who was a fiddle and a guitar and a banjo player and aficionado. One of the earliest country superstars was this man here, His name is Deford Bailey. Deford Bailey was from Nashville, Tennessee, and Deford Bailey was the first star of the Grand Ole Opry. And I want to just spend some time on Deford, and I want you to know his story, okay? And then I'll ask you a couple of questions. So I'm going to share my screen again. Let me get here so I can do that. And we'll get the sound popping. Okay.
Presenting the Grand Ole Opry, let her go, boys.
A generation before America credited Charlie Pride with breaking the color barrier in country music. Black listeners across the South were not only tuning into country, but tuning up to play along. The very first solo star in the footlights of the Grand Ole Opry stage was a frail, disabled black man from Smith County, Tennessee.
And now, friends, we introduce our little mascot, Deford Bailey, with his harmonica.
Nicknamed the Harmonica Wizard, Deford Bailey took no credit for his unique sound and role in history. He simply said it was a blessing from above that came by way of a curse.
Now, Deford Bailey was afflicted with polio. And so he played the harmonica and he made it sound like the things that he heard in the yard in his house in Smith County, Tennessee. And he heard foxes and he heard trains and different things like that. Now, Deford Bailey died before he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. I want to share one more little clip from his life.
What a wonderful man this man has made, a legend, but almost disappeared. And in a way, he did disappear.
We lost him there for 25 years. It was kind of like if Ernest Hemingway had suddenly decided to stop writing and go open up a bar in Key West. Yeah, I suppose, you know, he makes a living at it, but golly, all the great work that he could have done. And that's the way I feel about Deford today.
Deford's legacy includes only a few recordings, most captured in the last few years of his life by friend David Morton.
When I heard that music, boy, you get chills. I mean, tremendous. Deford's music was just absolutely incredible. You heard him and you felt like you were in the presence of a master.
Racism makes ignorant people out of all of us if we don't know history. And I think that Deford Bailey's memory is a victim of that.
What we have to do is stop thinking of it in terms of country music and blues and rock and roll. It's all one music. It's American music. It's roots music. And Deford was one of the people who best exemplified this wonderful melting pot mixture.
I think Deford Bailey haunts the country industry right now at the level of trying to make the industry view itself holistically rather than partially. If he remains a footnote in history, then a similar crime would be to put Benny Goodman, a white jazz player, as a footnote in jazz history. You can't do that. He's more than a footnote.
He was one of the first great innovators. Louis Armstrong, B.B. King, Elvis Presley. These are all people who have taken an older music and made it new again. And Deford tried to do that. And he did it very well, but he wasn't allowed to finish his job.
In 1967, Deford Bailey was invited back to play the opera stage. He would play that stage only 4 more times before his death in 1982.
Now, at the time of the, at the time of the shooting of that video, he had passed away. He had not been inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, even though he was a founding member of the Grand Ole Opry. He was the first performer to be played on the radio. And one of the things I want you to take notice of, think about how they described him. 2 words they used. They called him a mascot and they called him a wizard. So if Black people were in these spaces, they either had to be magical, right? Or they had to be a mascot, meaning that not a real just a representation of a real thing or a representation of a real human. And so you hear that and rather than just call him a man or an artist or whatever, they refer to him as that, because now there were people in that space. I mean, and I used to live in Nashville, and I went down to the Ryman, and there are pictures of all of these founding members of the Grand Ole Opry up in the Ryman. His picture is still not on there, and he wasn't inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame until I think 2004. And I know his son and his grandson, they still live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've actually done music with his grandson there. The only other Black artist in the Country Music Hall of Fame is Charlie Pride. And I'm going to mention Charlie Pride. And the reason why I wanted to spend a good bit of our time here, and I know the time is winding up, is because if I say soul music, you can give me a list of people. If I say hip hop, you can give me a list of people. If I say R&B, you can give me a list of people that are Black. If I say the blues, you can give me a list of people who are Black. And if I say country music, if I say roots music, if you're not a scholar, if you haven't done the work, if you haven't dug deep, most likely you don't even know. You can give me maybe 2 or 3. You may not know Deford, you may know Charlie Pride, but what about Solomon Burke? He had #1 country hits. This woman that I'm going to share with you right now is a North Carolina native. And I want to share, I want to share her with you because she was just last year, I think, inducted into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. Her name is Libby Cotton. And you have to know Miss Cotton, okay? She's best known for her timeless song Freight Train. She built her musical legacy on a firm foundation of late 19th and early 20th century African-American instrumental traditions. They still have to qualify, not American instrumental traditions. She won her first Grammy Award in 1985, and she was 90 years old, 80 years after she first began composing her own music. And she was born in Chapel Hill or Carborough. I think somebody said Carborough, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And she taught herself how to play guitar. She was left-handed, so she flipped the guitar upside down and played that way. Now, have you ever heard the term cotton picking? If you have in the chat, give me a yes. Have you ever heard the term cotton picking? Yeah. So you've heard the term cotton picking, and so let's think about that. That comes from her. That does not come from Black people picking cotton. It was her style of playing the guitar. This is the other thing. The way she got discovered is she moved to DC. She got married when she was about 14, 15 years old. Her husband said that respectable women don't play the guitar. And so she put down the guitar. She raised her kids And then as soon as they were grown, she left him and moved to DC. And she was working in a department store. And this little white girl came up to her and was crying, said, "Can you help me find my parents?" So she left where she was working and said, "Yes, I'll help you find them." She found the folks' parents, and her parents happened to be Ruth Seeger and Mike Seeger. The little girl's name was Peggy Seeger, the sister of Pete Seeger. And so they said, "Would you come and work with us, work for us?" They didn't know who she was. So one day she's working in their house, and she walks into this room full of instruments, picks up a guitar, starts playing the guitar. Mike Seeger walks in and says, "Oh my God," and found out that someone in London was trying to steal her music, got the rights to her music, and through that relationship, she ended up playing for the Kennedys and for John F. Kennedy in 1958 at the age of 62. She recorded her first album in 1957. She developed two distinct styles of banjo and 4 distinct styles of guitar. So anybody that's playing right now, anybody that's playing finger picking style banjo, different things like that, finger picking style guitar, that comes after her is probably playing one of her styles. Have any of you ever heard of Miss Cotton? And if you haven't, just say that too. So what I want to do with you, and this is a meditation, I want you to see this woman. I want you to see her doing what she does. I'm going to share my screen again. I have this video of her playing her song, Freight Train.
Freight train runs so fast. Freight train runs so fast. Please don't tell what train I'm on. They won't know what route I'm gone. When I am dead and in my grave, no more good time ere I crave. Place the stone at my head and feet. Tell them all that I'm gone to sleep. When I die, Lord, bury me deep, way down on Old Chestnut Street. And I can hear old Lumberna as she comes rolling by. Freight train runs so fast. Freight train runs so fast. Please don't tell what train I'm on. They won't know what route I'm gone.
Eric, the sound on the videos become muted.
Oh, I don't know how that happened. Let me stop the screen share and start it again. She only has a little bit of that song left, but
we got a good bit of the beginning.
Yeah. Let me see. I don't know. It just kind of it flipped on me too. So. Cotton, as I refer to her. This is Solomon Burke. Solomon Burke was a #1 selling country artist. He was so good that he was invited to a Klan rally because back then they didn't have MTV. They invited him to a Klan rally. He shows up. They were like, "You're not Solomon Burke. You can't be Solomon Burke." We were inviting the country artist Solomon Burke. And he said, well, yeah, they said, well, sing that song Going Down in the Valley. Prove to me that you're Solomon Burke. And of course, you know, Solomon had no problem proving to anybody who he was. He sung the song and they put him up on a hill with his band. They said, don't worry about what you see down in this valley. He starts playing Down in the Valley and he sees people coming down and he then realizes that he was in a Klan rally. And they said, just don't come off that hill. 45 minutes, he said he played Down in the Valley. Another artist, Charlie Pride. The only other person to sell more records on RCA than Charlie Pride was Elvis Presley. Okay. The only other. He had 29 #1 hits on the Billboard charts. Those were the ones that were #1. He had a total of 39. Okay. I want to just share a little piece about his life, just so that you can kind of get to know a little bit about him.
Beautiful. The civil rights movement, particularly the civil rights movement in the 60s, is a big dividing line between the African American influence on country or involvement or even taste in country.
A Mississippian with movie star good looks and a golden baritone voice rose to become one of the most recognizable names in country music.
No one else has the worldwide name recognition that Charlie Pride has.
Charlie Pride was just 14 when he bought his first guitar with money he earned picking cotton. He later became a player in the Negro Baseball League. His sports career took him to Montana, and record producer Jack Cowboy Clement brought him to Nashville.
But it was a novelty to have a be cut in a country session with a black person.
Oh, the snakes crawl at night. That's what they say.
Snakes Crawl at Night was the first song Charlie and Cowboy Clement cut together.
When I heard him in the studio, that's when I really knew that, hey, I heard that big booming voice come through those speakers in there, and it was great. We drew quite a crowd that first session. Well, I'd promised Chet Atkins I'd play it for him first, so I did. And he kept it for a couple of weeks, and then they turned it down.
But a month later, a casual encounter changed Charlie's life.
Chet Atkins walked by. He asked me if I'd done anything with this colored boy. I said, not yet. I'm thinking about pressing it up myself. He said, well, I've been thinking about that. We might be passing up another Elvis Presley.
As Pride churned out hit after hit, 36 #1s, a career filled with Grammy Awards, gold and platinum records, only second to Elvis Presley in record sales for RCA.
Any place is all right as long as I can forget I've ever known her.
In the early days of touring, neither Pride nor the audience knew what to expect.
And now, from RCA, Charlie Pride. And I come out of those shadows up in the lights and it's like turning down a volume. You could drop a pin. So what we had come up with, we said, now, ladies and gentlemen, I realize it's a little unique, me coming out here on a country music show wearing this permanent tan. So I went into my show.
This Mississippi native brought his first guitar at age 14, but he took a swing at a sports career before trying music.
In 2000, the Country Music Hall of Fame announced the induction of its newest member, Charlie Pride. He's the only African American to have that distinction.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
That same year, Pride was honored at the CMA Awards show.
With 11th grade education, I look back, I don't feel too bad of the accomplishments that I've made. They're the same hands that used to milk cows and pick cotton. They said, but they're not that. I said, no, I hold a microphone now. Well, I'm appreciative that God has let me go from there to here, and I mean that.
There is a new generation of African-American artists navigating into the country music industry. These performers are armed with talent and optimism.
One day, there will be a black person who goes to the bank on country.
Pride. Y'all know who that is, Rhiannon Giddens. You know, her music is very, very accessible. She just won a MacArthur Fellowship, and she's been doing a lot of work on early American Black roots music. I'm going to turn the corner just a little bit because I know we got to get into the stretch. You know, I usually take at least 2 hours to do this presentation, so I won't get a chance to talk too much about rock and roll. But you know, when we talk about rock and roll, we got to talk about the godmothers of rock and roll. But I will just mention this because it came up in the chat: Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and also Big Mama Thornton, the composer of or the first performer of the song Hound Dog that kind of made Elvis famous. But like I said, rock and roll, you also have to think about oh my gosh, Little Richard, who just recently passed away. So many others that contributed to the emergence of rock and roll and the creation of it. But I want to turn your attention to this person right here, Josh White. Josh White introduced African-American folk, blues, and work songs to white America and the rest of the world. And his album Chain Gang was the first social protest album ever released by an artist. An interesting story, one of his best friends was Eleanor Roosevelt. And while he was traveling outside of the United States with her, he was also blacklisted for the content of his music and his art. One song in particular, called Marching Down Freedom's Road, was penned by him and a brother by the name of Langston Hughes. And it was a protest song that was protesting the treatment of Black soldiers after they returned from World War II. I'm going to share that song with you right now. So let me switch back here. And Marching Down Freedom's Road, okay? And y'all can hear that. Someone said they needed a little bit more sound on the music. It goes like this. That's why I'm marching. Yes, I'm marching. I'm marching down freedom's road. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. Nobody gonna keep me from marching down freedom's road. Hand me my gun, let the bugle blow loud. I'm on my way with my head up proud. There's just one message that I've got in view, that is to keep a hold of freedom for me and you. That's why I'm marching. Yes, I'm marching. I'm marching down freedom's road. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. Nobody gonna keep me from marching down freedom's road. It ought to be plain as the nose on your face. There's room enough in this land for every race. Some folks will tell you freedom just ain't right. Those are the very people that I'm gonna fight. That's why I'm marching. Yes, I'm marching. I'm marching down freedom's road. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. Nobody gonna and white together, united we'll fight. That's why I'm marching. Yes, I'm marching. I'm marching down freedom's road. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. Nobody gonna keep me from marching down freedom's road. From marching down freedom's road. From marching down freedom's road. There you go. We're gonna keep rolling, y'all. We gotta keep rolling, but Freedom's Road. Now, that was one of the songs that kind of launched a campaign called the Double V campaign. Meant that if Black people could fight for victory over there, we should be able to attain a civil rights victory over here. And we know how that went because we're still fighting, you know, to have our rights respected. And you know, we are living, you know, we're living in a time of you know, a modern day kind of lynching culture, and you know, the women played a very, very prominent role. I'm gonna show you this as well, because I think you need to see this, because we have to acknowledge that these women, they said of this song by Billie Holiday, Strange Fruit, Rolling Stone said that was the most influential song of the 20th century. And she said that one of her biggest influences was Bessie Smith, who was from Chattanooga, Tennessee, you know, who was referred to as the Empress of the Blues. So she also sits at the foundation and the evolution of rock and roll as well. You think about all of these women that contributed to this culture. I have a whole presentation on women that I do on you know, Black female banjo players and jazz artists and rock and roll artists, Big Mama Thornton, and someone mentioned a woman from North Carolina that plays guitar behind her head. I know her. I don't know her name right now, but you know, reach out and maybe I'll pop on and do a little session for you. I'm trying to move through so that we can get some of these other things, and also you know, we have to talk about the freedom songs. And I'm going to have a little friend join me really, really quickly. I know we want to get to the Q&A. Worthington Dozier, can I borrow you for a minute? So one of the things that I have learned to do is to really archive this music in my children. And we do a lot of singing of this music because I want to teach my kid how to really be an activist. And you know, Howard Zinn, who was the historian of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, talks about the new music that these young people had created. They created a new gospel music out of the old, made up of the songs adapted or written in jail on the picket line. Every battle station in the Deep South now has its freedom chorus, and the mass meetings therein with everyone standing, led by the youngsters of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was started at Shaw University in North Carolina. So some more North Carolina history. Raise your hands for North Carolina folks. Nina Simone was mentioned as well. And so, but this is what was most interesting about what he says about the role that Black people were playing for America at that time, and which they had constantly been engaged in playing since the inception of this country. He says that it is one of the conditions of effective psychotherapy that the patient must begin to see himself as he really is. And the United States, now forced by the young Negro to see itself through his eyes, an ironic reversal, for the Negro was always compelled to see himself through the eyes of the white man, is coming closer to a realistic appraisal of its national personality. So I'm going to have my my daughter sing, you know, just a little quick sampling of some of this music for us, if y'all don't mind. And her name is Worthington Dozier. And there she is. Hi. Are you ready, honey? Yeah. Let's see if we can get you on here and you can get a hear thing. Well, I can't hear if you do the other one, but you can stand really close to me. You ready? Yes. So we're going to do some freedom songs. I told y'all I was going to have y'all sing. Are y'all ready? Oh, somebody says they love your dress, your princess dress.
Thank
okay.
You
might not be able to do your thing, but here, can you hold it? Hold it in that ear. Okay. And just sing. We may not do the sing that freedom song. This little light of mine. What you gonna do? Whoa! This little light, I'm gonna let it baby. Thank you, honey. All right, so that's my baby. That's what we do in our house all the time. So now what I would like to do, I know we're running low on time, but I'm gonna close with a song, okay? And I know we're running out of time, but I will come back if they'll have me back, or you go to my page at ericdozier.com, sign up, and we'll maybe get a chance where we can kind of get a little deeper in on some of this stuff. But I want to leave you with a song. This song is called Cotton and the Cross. And, years ago, I got a box set of music, and that box set of music, contained a number of CDs. It was called, I think, Goodbye Babylon. And so in that box set of CDs, there was cotton, like literal cotton, like big bowls of cotton in there. And then the CDs were a puzzle. So when you laid the puzzle on the floor, what you saw was a shape of a cross when you put them together, and there was a cotton stalk that was there, basically, that made up the cross. And I began to think about the connection between the church and commerce, Christianity and commerce, in particular, and the how the religious institutions were complicit in the slavery, in the promotion of slavery. And I it took me a minute, and I sat with those words, cotton and the cross, in my spirit for a long time, being a love letter to my Southern brothers and sisters. And I want to leave you with that before we get to the Q&A. I'm sorry it took so long to get here, but there's a lot of ground to cover, and we won't cover it in a day because it's been buried for so long. But I want to leave you with this love letter because, as James Baldwin said, the role of the artist is very much like the role of the lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you do not see.
We
Thank you so much. I'll stop right there. I think I went over my time. So sorry about that, guys.
Eric, thank you so much. I think the comments we were getting, people were loving it. So I think we'll take a little bit of time if that's okay with everybody.
Yes, you can take some time. I have some time, so just jump in.
Awesome. All right, I'll just get right into it. And then for those of you who are able to stick around at the end, Eric has a great send off for you, but we'll start with questions. So Colleen would like to know what can individuals of the non-Black and particularly white communities do to help others awaken to and make use of the lessons that Black cultural heritage offers us?
Oh, that's a good question. And that's kind of what that's kind of what I've tried to engage in over the years. You know, one of the things that I've used, you know, I use the music as a doorway. And when people ask me to kind of describe what it is that I do, I tell them that I'm a social studies teacher that uses music to teach people about racial justice. I don't really consider myself to be a music teacher per se, because you know, I believe that music does carry data, and you know, I think it was Billy Preston that wrote a song years ago, and he says that everybody likes some kind of music. And so the music is kind of the sugar, you know, or it's kind of the marshmallow that you put the pill in for people, you know, when you want them to take the medicine. And so, you know, so, you know, one of the things that I would recommend is, you know, take in the literature that is out there. You know, I don't believe that white folks should go off into a room and isolate themselves and work on this problem with just them, because they don't know what they're doing. You know, they don't. I think that the relationship is symbiotic. And the reason I say that it is symbiotic is because legally in this country, you know, up until about the early 1700s, the people that we know as Irish, German, English, all these folks had no possibility of becoming white. It was a legal construct in this country. I think Theodore Allen says that up until that in 1619, when the first Africans were brought here, that there were no white people here. And what he meant by that is that there was no one legally, there was no one in this country that wasn't even America at that time. It was still a colony of England, that there was no one in that colony of England that referred to themselves as white. That did not happen until the laws began to change. So what I tell people is that white people and Black people were created legally at the same time in this country. And so even when white people were created at first, there were a number of people that were not included on the white team: Germans, Irish, Italians, Jews. So that, you know, so that was a long process. But you can't have white people without having Black people, because whiteness was defined in the negative. Whiteness was what Black was not. And so that's why you get all of these negative traits that have been projected onto Black people, because if white is good, Black has to be bad. If white is smart, Black has to be silly or ignorant. You know, like the pictures, the contrasting pictures that I showed earlier of the Fifth Jubilee singers and the Black minstrel caricature. And so I think that you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to throw yourself into the literature, but also bring yourself into closer proximity of Black people and listen to us when we talk. believe believe what we say about our experience, and a lot of listening has to happen. Yeah, did I catch it?
I think you caught it.
Okay.
And it's a great lead into our next question, which is, what advice do you have? This is from Amy. What advice do you have for how white people can best and better listen to the voices of Black Americans?
Well, you know, this is what I constantly tell my white brothers and sisters, because the thing is that, you know, there's a reason why you don't know what to do. That's the first thing you need to understand, is the reason why you feel like you need to ask people what to do. It's because there has been a long stretch of your history that is not taught to you when you are a little white boy or a little Black girl, a little white boy, little white girl. You know, they don't teach you about John Brown. They don't teach you about Prudence Crandall, who, you know, up in Connecticut opened up a school, an all-girls school, and had one Black student, and they said, you have to close your school down because you can't educate Black girls here. She shut her school down and opened it for Black girls only. Now, this is a white woman, okay? The Grimke sisters, Sarah and Angelina Grimke, who were very, very powerful abolitionists from South Carolina. So all the abolitionists were not in the North. Don't let people tell you that either, because there were Southern white people that were standing up for Black people. We have a long history, as long as we have been instituting these racist laws and policies. There have been white and Black people and indigenous people that have fought back. Okay, that history did not start in the 60s. It started, we have a long history of that. So that's why I tell my white friends is that you need to get you some new heroes. Like, get you some heroes, because they're there. Another one, Jesse Daniels Ames. Jesse Daniels Ames, around the same time that that Strange Fruit came out, she built on a lot of the work of Ida B. Wells. She was a white woman that led an anti-lynching campaign across the United States. She wrote plays and put them on stage. And she said that she refuses to allow white men to continually kill Black men under the guise of protecting the virtue of white women. So there are white people that are, you know, that have been heroes for racial justice, and that what we need to do is normalize that behavior in the white community. That's the biggest issue. You know, what we're saying now is go get your cousin, go get your folks, you know, deal with your folks, deal with those things that you hear around the dinner table, you know, as you're drawing closer and closer to Black people, you know, I believe that your white relatives will probably help you along with that, you know, and maybe not in, you know, with a little bit of negative reinforcement possibly too, because when you think about who punished white people for moving towards unity, it wasn't Black people. You don't have to be scared about approaching Black people. It was white people that punished you for that. It was white people that drug William Lloyd Garrison through the streets of Boston. It was white people that burned down Prudence Crandall's school. It was white people that ran the Grimke sisters out of South Carolina, not Black people. The Grimke sisters actually had two nephews, Archibald and another nephew that I can't remember, but they were the children of their grandfather, I believe, who had raped one of his slaves. They went and found their two nephews, their two Black nephews, and even if you see pictures of them, they even look alike, and put them through Princeton and put another one through Dartmouth. So yeah, there are things that you can do. There are examples in your own history that you can draw on. And that's why, you know, we have to normalize this behavior, normalize behaving justly. And that's what it's about. And there are a lot of examples in our history. So that's what I would say to that.
You're really on a roll, because
I'm sorry. Yeah. That subject is very dear to me because I need, I want all of my white friends to understand that racism hurts you too. And that there's more to it than just acknowledging the trauma that it has had on Black people, because it's traumatized you too. It's kept you in the dark about your truth. And I believe that truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtue. If you don't have truth, you can't go forward. Okay. And that's the thing. The reason why you have not been told that history, and I'm speaking to my white brothers and sisters, is because white folk don't want you behaving that way. Because if you start behaving that way, everything falls apart. Your ignorance allows those things to continually grind Black and brown people up all over the globe. But once you start to know, then you can start to do. That behavior should be normalized for you, the behavior of resistance. You should be out with the people. You should be standing up for them, because when you actually think about it, America as a whole, like really think about how racism is working out for white folk, right? I mean, people are committing suicide. They're getting sicker. They're not reproducing. Like it's not even physically healthy for you. Like the country is dying because of it. And you're inside a burning house, but have been convinced that your house is not burning. So you know what? If you move in that direction, what you will find is you will find Black and brown people already there waiting for you to show up and do what you need to do as a white person. And there's a lot of history and a lot of current history as well that we can draw on in that regard.
And you touched on this a little bit, but Amy also asks what you think it'll take for our educational system to begin telling us the truth about our history.
There, you know what? My bet is that it won't, because it wasn't designed to tell you the truth. It was designed to socialize you to carry forward a particular agenda of propaganda. Like that's what Carter G. Woodson said about it. He said that educational system at the same time elevates white people and has them thinking that they are superior, right? But at the same time, if you put a Black kid and a white kid side by side in that same chair, by the time they get to the end of that pipeline, that white child has been self-esteem has been nurtured, and that Black kid has been told that he's not as good as that child. And it's the same history book, it's the same teachers, it's the same, but it's one insidious system. You should read a book called Dumbing Us Down, which is a fabulous book that was written by a teacher of the year from New York, and he talks about that. Sir Ken, I think Richardson is his last name, wrote a lot about the education system. And we need to keep in mind, the thing is that, if something is rotten at the core, all it can produce is death. Like it can't produce anything else. And at the base of America's public education system is racism. And it was designed to perpetuate that. At the base of America's entertainment industry is racism. And I showed you that. Like I showed you that because I wanted to show you the modus operandi. I wanted you to see how it operates, because it not only operates like that in the realm of the arts, but it also operates in the realm of science, in the realm of sociology, in the realm of medicine. And I'll give you an example. All of you know who Bill Gates is, right? Yes. And I don't even have to know. If I ask you to type it, everybody would type yes. Everybody knows who Steve Jobs is, right? Good. Okay. Any of you know who Gladys West is? If you know her, press yes. How many, if you know Gladys West, type yes. If you don't know her, type no. All right, I'm looking. No, 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 no. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. Now, I showed you how Black people were erased from the history of early roots music. I see a bunch of no's. Okay. Yeah. Someone says that they know, and because they work in science, right? And someone knows because they Googled. Now, Gladys West was the woman that developed the global positioning system, the GPS. She is the reason why I can call my friend Jeanette on the phone and not have wires connected to the phone call. If there is no GPS, there is no internet, there is no cell phone, there's none of that stuff. Do y'all hear me? So why do you know Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and you don't know who Gladys West is? Because the same thing that will elevate these particular men and not highlight the contribution of this Black female that did that, it's not a neutral, it's, you know, the education system has never been neutral. It has never committed to telling the truth. Okay. So that's what we have to understand, is that as we approach these things, if you know the foundations of this country, then you'll know what to look for. You'll be able to spot the lie. You'll be able to see it. And we have to have an unbridled commitment to the truth and to justice, or otherwise these things don't happen. Can we take another one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is maybe a three-parter on
Lord.
artists. So, and I can pitch them to you one at a time if it's a lot. But Justin wants to know, you spoke a little bit to Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about her influence on modern guitarists and how that can be better highlighted? Who influenced her and why she's so often overlooked? And I'll give you the other one.
Well, I mean, it's very clear why she's so often overlooked is because she's a Black woman. And so you just think about rock and roll now. If I was to ask you to describe a typical rock and roll artist, you know, you think like, okay, this, you know, white man. You think, I mean, just name a few: Mick Jagger, blah blah blah. You name them. Those are the people. The Beatles and all these folks. You know, or you know, what's the Who? You know, the majority of the Who's first albums were covers of old Black blues folk, right? You know, like you could probably name one rock and roll, like Chuck Berry. You know, I saw Chuck Berry pop up in the chat, but yeah, Chuck Berry. You know, most people don't know that Chuck Berry was a multi-instrumentalist as well, and he played country music. That's what he played. What was around him. He is in the Country Music Hall of Fame. He has an exhibit there. He's not an inductee, but they talk to him, as being one that sits at the roots of modern country music, you know, as well as rock and roll. Okay, but the reason why she's not acknowledged, you know, she's a Black female, you know, and the other reason is because with the advent of race records in the 1920s and 1930s, the record executives were committed to making money. So they segregated the market. So that's why you have Black radio stations and what became known as white radio stations and different things like that. And so when I, you know, like when I go and I'll give you an example. I've gone to schools and I'll bring a banjo to school. Majority Black kids, and they say, well, why'd you bring a banjo to school? Because we don't play that type of music. Okay. Now, where in the world did they hear that? You know, because they're not just on a daily basis talking about banjos and things, but they heard it from somewhere. Okay. You know, they heard it from somewhere. They heard that that's not their kind of music, even though the instrument comes from West Africa. Right. You know, a lot of her guitar styles, as well as the styles of a lot of these Black artists that I talked to, they were nurtured in the Black church. They didn't take guitar lessons and things like that. You know, what I refer to the Black American church as far as arts and creativity, you know, that Black church was, I refer to it as a conservatorium. You know, it's a conservatory. Now, when you think about it, let's just think about all of the students that came through that conservatory, okay? Think about all of the students that came through the conservatory of the Black church. You mentioned one, Rosetta Tharpe, Mahalia Jackson, Billie Holiday, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Gladys Knight, Whitney Houston, right? Beyonce, you know, I mean, the Temptations. You know, you can't separate the Temptations in that style from the early Black quartet groups that came out of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, or that ultimately became the Dixie Hummingbirds, if you've heard of them, or the Five Blind Boys from Alabama. They're doing the same thing, but they're changing the lyrics, right? And that's the thing, is that institution, as Dr. West said, that institution was a cultural structure. Paul Robeson came through there. So not just our popular music, but our jazz artists and our classical artists like Robeson, like Kathleen Battle, like Jesse Norman, all of them came through there, you know, as well. So when you talk about Sister Rosetta Tharpe's influence, you know, they were playing rock and roll in churches before they were playing it in the clubs. You know, and I tell you, go to YouTube and look up the rock and roll sermon. And you listen to the preacher preach and listen to the musicians that were playing behind him. Leontine Price was another one, another classical artist that came through the conservatorium of the Black church. I hope that answered the question.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to how you would situate Leadbelly in this history, and also how you feel newer artists like Robert Randolph are incorporating instruments like the steel guitar into blues, and how that'll influence artists moving forward?
Well, okay, so I'll speak to Robert Randolph first. Now, Robert Randolph is not an anomaly. Robert Randolph was raised in North Florida that has a long, deep history of the steel pedal guitar being the lead instrument in the Black churches in North Florida. Okay, he didn't come out of nowhere. He's a church boy. He's a church musician. All of his cousins are. They grew up playing in churches, and if you've ever seen him in concert, near the end of their concert, all of them stand up and they rotate and they go to different instruments. Everybody, they shift like in the middle of a song, right? They learned how to do that in church. They didn't go to Berkeley. You know, they didn't go to a conservatory to learn how to do that. They learned how to do that on Sunday morning. So Robert Randolph's roots are you know, they run deep, because that is an instrument that was the lead instrument in a lot of the churches in North Florida, you know, whereas like in, you know, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, places like that, the lead instrument is most of the time like a piano or B3 organ or something like that. But in that region, it was the steel pedal guitar. Like people like Audrey Gent was one of his influences. You can look up Black steel pedal guitar on YouTube as well, and you'll see all of these old Black dudes playing the thing, and a bunch of women playing it as well. So, you know, and see, this is another thing that we have to understand about history. You know, you know, most of the time we start counting things as valuable when white people notice them. Okay, that's a bias that we have. You know, there are folks that knew about, you know, Robert Randolph when he was a kid. They probably nurtured him in that and said, "You're going to be the one that's going to take this thing across the world," and he did. That's what he did. But what he did as well is he shined the light on a culture that has very, very deep roots. And so that's another instance where you have you know, where you have a system that just does not allow you to see that until mainstream white America sees it. You know, if you're not in a black church in North Florida, you wouldn't see it, right? So who was the other person they mentioned?
Lead Belly.
Lead Belly. I mean, you know, the thing is that, you know, the same thing with Lead Belly, he got reclassified as folk blues, right? Even though he was he was a formational and foundational folk artist in American music. So when you say folk music, a lot of times, you know, like the genre, he was reclassified as folk blues. Another one, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee from North Carolina as well, from the hills of North Carolina. If you don't know who they are, they're the ones that used to do the intro to the Dave Chappelle show, the two old black men, you know. You know, another duo that got reclassified as folk blues and not as either country or bluegrass or anything like that, because they segregated the market. And they were actually mentors to a lot of people that played folk music and different things like that. So, but yeah, I mean, of course, Lead Belly, you know, is, you know, plays prominently in that tradition. You know, and what's interesting, I mean, it's the same thing is that, you know, a lot of our kids, a lot of black kids don't see themselves doing that type of music, but, you know, that's our music too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think we'll call it on questions. If you guys have more questions that you want to pose to Eric, you can go to his website, which is ericdozier.com, and he's got a contact form on there. So we'll include that link in the post event email to all registrants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I'll just say, you know, you can follow me on Instagram. You know, I'm in the process right now of kind of taking this presentation and breaking it up and doing little video vignettes, you know, of me sharing about the music and stuff like that. And you know, you know, there are many ways that, like, if you, I'm the old Eric Dozier online. I got my name and everything first. So you can find me at Eric Dozier on Twitter, on Instagram, Eric Dozier Music on Facebook and YouTube, and then we also we also have a Patreon project that we're doing called the Great American Race Unity Road Trip. You can find that at patreon.com/Eric Dozier or ericdozier.com/road trip. You can find everything on my website. That'll take you everywhere. But basically, before the pandemic hit, me and my wife and my two daughters hit the road, and we've traveled across the United States, gathering people in spaces of joy and spirit to talk about racial justice and racial unity. And we've gotten a lot of support from a lot of our friends so that we can continue to do that. A lot of our work has shifted to virtual presentations. So I'm always doing virtual presentations. And if you're following me in these spaces, you'll know when they're happening, and maybe you'll catch some of the other portions of this presentation. Thank you so much for having me here, Jeanette. It has been a joy and just a great joy for me to be here tonight.
Thank you so much for being here, and to all of the participants who joined us tonight. If you guys want to continue to engage in the NCMA in Dialogue series or other virtual webinars, you can go to the North Carolina Museum of Art website and sign up for our newsletter. Yeah. So thank you again, Eric. This has been so amazing. You've gotten very many comments about how wonderful and how they didn't want this to stop. So on that note, please take us out.
All right. So I'm going to ask you to sing a little call and response. Okay. Are you ready? Okay. So the words are borrowed from our sister Assata Shakur. She says, "It's our duty to fight for our freedom. It's our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We've got nothing to lose but our chains." So you just sing the line right after me. I know I won't be able to hear you, but I will hear you in spirit. It's our duty to fight for our freedom. It's our duty to win. It's our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. We are young, but we are mighty. We are young, but we are mighty. We are old, but we are strong. We are old, but we are strong. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. We are black and white together. We are black and white together. Many other colors too. Many other colors too. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We've got nothing to lose but our chains. 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 Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, Eric.
You're so